Welcome, everybody. My name is Josh Tice, and my lifeguard walks on water. I know you want this hat. I picked it up at a trucker stop in the middle of, I think, Alabama. This is the perfect type of hat that you buy in Alabama. Always remember it. We are glad you're here today. Today, we're going to be having a great discussion, and I'm looking forward to it. But before we do, we want to go ahead and go to the Lord in a word of prayer and ask the Lord to bless our time. Of course, be in prayer for all of those who have been hurting, and not only in your local ministries, but especially those that are part of this network, pastors that are going through quite a bit. I know a lot of you have been praying for Logan. Continue to do so. We continue to lift up Tony's family in prayer. Also, be in prayer for ES. Many of you guys know ES. ES is in the hospital right now. He's been part of the network for quite a while, part of this group, the charter members, and he's in the hospital. Just found that out. If you follow Kevin Zerpel and his group, you'll know that. So just be in prayer for them. I'm going to go to Dale Curdy and ask him to bring the prayer today, simply because I do believe that the Lord especially hears us with a beard as good as Dale's, and I need this prayer heard today. Would you go ahead, open us up in a word of prayer?
Yeah, let's pray together. God, we do humbly come before you and acknowledge that you are in control, and you are so great, and we need your help today, and we need your wisdom to think properly and to communicate with each other. And we lift up our friends, ministry partners that are hurting right now. We think especially about Logan and his family, and for ES as well, as he's in the hospital, Lord, and our other friends that are on our hearts. Lord, we lift them up to you and trust for you to act according to what is good. And so bless this time together right now, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Kylie.
All right. All right, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for being here on this Tuesday. I have some really cool announcements. Usually you guys can almost anticipate my announcements because of what you see in the Facebook group. But today I have some really, really cool ones. I'm going to start with ones you already know and save the best for last. So you guys just heard last week about Idea Day Las Vegas in January. That is exclusive to members. So if you're a member in this group, you get to come to that, and it's free. That you do have a +1 option. You'll receive a letter and an email with some more details on that I can't go into all of them right now, but we're really stoked about that. More of an old school style, like how it used to be many years ago when it was just a very small group of pastors. A lot of us miss those days of when it was just, 30 guys around a table, and that's kind of what it will be like in January. So if you can make it, plan on being there January 25th. And then you heard last week about the open house in September, where you'll be able to invite some friends if they want to join in on the membership program for the month of September. Again, that'll be in the email with the invites that you can send off to them. So the fun one that I have for you guys today is today we are celebrating our 100th podcast with Idea Talks podcast. So you've seen Hugo posting on Instagram, and you've probably seen a few of us post as well. We're really excited about this milestone and just the celebration. And we're really commemorating it by just sharing some special announcements and giving out some giveaways. If you've already listened to the podcast, you're awesome. If you haven't, go listen to it today sometime. It's really great. And a lot of you actually have your voices on this podcast. We have, I think, I don't even know, quite a few, many, just testimonials that a lot of you and other pastors have sent in other ministry leaders sent in for just talking about how Idea Talks podcast has impacted just their life and what ideas they've gotten from it and the inspiration that it's given them. We even just today, I saw an email come through about a missionary who has just been extremely encouraged from Idea Talks podcast. Because for all the reasons we already know, if you're part of this Idea Network membership, you probably already know why that it's extremely encouraging for some of these missionaries to hear other pastors talk the way that Pastor Josh and the guests that we have on, how they talk. And so go listen to that. I will share a few sneak peeks with you guys of what the announcements are on that podcast, but I won't share them all because I want you to go listen to it. But one of the things we talk about is you already know about, the open house in September, that if other people want to hop on to the charter membership, that they can. And then Idea Summit 2023, we haven't announced this anywhere yet, but it will be in Dallas, Texas, not in Las Vegas. So this will be the first Idea Summit that is not in Las Vegas. And it's really mostly because we have outgrown our facilities in Las Vegas. All of you coming with all your teams and your staff.
Wait a second, Kylie. This is the first I'm hearing about this. We're not doing the summit in Las Vegas. I thought, like, how did this take place? Why didn't you guys tell me? Oh, you did.
We love Southern Hills, but it was time.
Was that in a memo or something? Because I don't read the memos.
Check your inbox.
That's right. It is Dallas. Robbie Green is going to be hosting our very first ever summit. I mean, obviously we do Idea Days regionally all over the country, obviously next year. Some of we're going to have one down in Tampa next year. And we're going to have one up in Chicago. Those are awesome regional events, but this is the actual summit. And the summit that only happens every 2 years is going to be happening in Dallas, Texas next year because Robbie Green has a big church. And ours is too small now, but that's because there's so many of you guys, and that's really exciting. What Kylie has planned for this event is pretty exciting. Talk a little bit about the family theme, Kylie.
Yes. So again, that's another big part of that announcement that we've never done before. And really mostly because we don't have space. We didn't have space before to have the whole family come. We know those of you who have children know that in the past we've had very limited childcare at the summit simply because the nurseries were overflowing, even just with only having 0 to 4-year-olds. And so naturally we understand, and I as a lady understand that a lot of times if there's no childcare, the lady ministry leaders can't come because a lot of times they are tasked with managing the children. And so we want to be able to have the lady ministry leaders attend, the pastors' wives and everyone, the Christian school teachers, all of that. And so this is a family-oriented event. And it's not just that we're providing childcare, just, so we'll babysit your kids while you go to the summit. There's actual tracks for each child's age. And we've partnered with some youth ministry leaders and some children's ministry leaders specifically to run those areas and those tracks specifically. So we have a youth track.
How many of you were PKs growing up and your parents dragged you to a pastor's conference? Anybody like I did? Any of you guys? And it's like not awesome sometimes. So what we did was we basically created an Idea Network event for the grade schoolers and for the teenagers. So this can be tacked on literally to a family vacation, or it can just be a 3-day family getaway to where they're not stuck in a room and you throw in a pizza every couple hours. They're actually having a full Idea Network event for their age bracket. We're really excited about this, and we do think it's going to help us take the entirety of the summit to the next level. So we're pretty stoked.
One more thing on this family summit idea really has been born out of a heart for ministry families as a whole. It started out as, Idea Day and Idea Summit was, we never wanted it to be pastors only. We always wanted all ministry leaders to come, but just because of the nature of it, it tends to be that. And so we wanted to reach the entire ministry family, and that includes the youth and the teenagers. You know, the youth and the teenagers growing up in a ministry home have a different perspective on ministry and the Bible and the gospel and all of it than a kid who's just a regular Joe who goes to church with his parents, and they're Christians, yes, but they're not ministry kids. And so, and likewise, ministry kids deal with different struggles that regular Joe kids don't. The pressures of being a ministry kid and having different expectations just because you're the pastor's kid and all of that. It's something I don't understand. I was not a PK or a ministry kid, but I have a lot of friends who were, and they've told me about that. And I'm like, I didn't experience that at all. But that's because I wasn't in that world. And your kids are in that world. And we want to provide sessions that are going to speak to their experiences and that part of being in ministry. So we're really excited about that aspect, loving it. We've flown out to Dallas, me, Caleb Sargent, and Andrew Owens, who are leading those tracks. We're really stoked about those tracks and how that's going to go. I do have one more thing for you. So we're going to kind of close the box on the summit there, or I could talk about it all afternoon because it's going to be amazing. But the giveaways, there are giveaways in the podcast, which is what we're talking about. And I saw some of you already post Idea Talks 100. So I think some of you have already listened, but we're giving away some books, some Idea Night tickets. So if you were to be part of that and win, you would have even more Idea Night tickets to give away. And we're giving away something else too, and I can't remember right now what it is. So go listen and enjoy the podcast.
A car.
A car. Yes, a car. And I will win that car. That would be mine. But yeah, go listen to the podcast and enjoy and like and share it so that everyone can celebrate and be a part of this 100th podcast celebration. Back to you, Pastor Josh.
We are excited about that. And of course, we're excited about the members only exclusive event that's coming up here in Las Vegas in January. I really have gotten several texts from you guys saying, man, I'm coming to that. That's going to be awesome. Really is going to be cool. It's going to be old school. I know we have over 100 official members, part of the charter membership. I really don't think more than 25 to 30 of us. If everybody shows up, fantastic. But if it's 25, 30 of us, honestly, it's going to be incredible. That type of environment, to have a roundtable full day, I long for those early days when the network was that small. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So plan on coming to that. Today, we got to get to the topic because I'm really excited to introduce to you Josh Griffin. For those who aren't familiar with Josh, Josh is one of the leading voices of youth ministry over the last 20 years and has 20 years experience in the trenches. Most recently, the high school pastor of Saddleback Church. He's the co-founder of downloadyouthministry.com. It has been in over 300 plus episodes of DYM podcast with Doug Fields. Many of you know Doug, of course. He's created more than 50 youth ministry resources and authored several books, including 99 Thoughts for Small Group Leaders. Josh and his wife, Angela, have 4 kids, which now include 2 teenagers of their own. And he's come to kick off this conversation to talk about how to get volunteers to show up for special events. Josh, why don't you take it away?
Wow, that was a great introduction. I kind of want to meet that guy. He sounds great. Welcome, everybody. Great to see you. My name is Josh, and as you just heard, I run an organization called Download Youth Ministry to help youth workers. So if you're in youth ministry, you're my favorites. And if you're not in youth ministry, you're still doing kingdom work, just not the most important one. So glad that I get to hang out with you and share a little bit today. I'm actually a junior high pastor now. 13 years at Saddleback as the high school pastor, and now the last 2, largely in the COVID world, as the junior high pastor at Mariners Church. I'm actually in our youth room right now. We're getting ready for summer camp, and so I very much understand the topic of today and am living it out. So I'm not just some guy who used to do church work. I'm in it, and I'm in it full time. When I'm done here, I'm going downstairs and getting right back to working on summer camp next week, where we have a ton of volunteers. And so as I was thinking about this topic of getting people to volunteer at a special event, or how to effectively train them and encourage them, I just started to do a little bit of a brain dump in my years of ministry experience, going, what has worked and what's not worked. And for me, like, how do you reach me? So I'm not saying that the principles that I'm sharing today are the way to reach everybody, but they're the way to reach me. They're the way to train me. They're the way to get my attention, to cut through the noise and chaos of having teenagers in my home and a full-time job. How do you reach me, and how do you train me, and what's most effective? And so I hope that some of it is helpful and insightful to you as you add it to what you're already doing, and as you have been leading your church and ministry as well. We just on Sunday finished our leader training. So before camp, you want to make sure that your leaders are trained, especially those that are in cabins that are helping kids, especially with spiritual discussions. And as I walked away from that meeting, I thought to myself, was this meeting really worth their time? So you've done the hard work of getting volunteers, and you've shaken the trees, and you've made announcements from stage. Just as an aside, the old days, you used to just be able to make an announcement from stage, and at least for me, people would volunteer. Now, usually it was the same handful of people, but at least they would volunteer. And now I feel like things have changed, where, especially in the larger church context where I'm serving now, when you say something from stage, everybody assumes that everybody else is going to volunteer. So instead of, and I use a gun analogy, which is not very popular here in California, but I would say the shotgun approach of just shoot far and wide and just spread the message out there, and hopefully you'll get some return, is not as good as the sniper. And the sniper is where we ask one person, and you cast vision to one person, and you invite one person, and that one person will oftentimes say yes. Little pro tip: some of the people that are the least typical in your church or ministry, when you ask them to ask somebody, it's really powerful. I'll give you an example. There's a guy in our church, his name is Tim, and he is the CEO of a bajillion-dollar company, super busy, super important, super powerful, would never say yes to me. Like, hey, I need you to volunteer in our youth ministry, or come help at this special event, or show up for this training. There is a 0% chance that he would say yes to me. Now, I'd like to think of myself as credible, and I've paid some dues, and I try to be a youth pastor who's fun, but has a mature and thoughtful side as well, always holding that intention. So I'd like to think that it isn't just that he would dismiss me because it's, kids or youth ministry, or it's beneath him. I don't think it's that. I think he just has a lot of stuff going on, and he's busy, and there's a lot of things vying for his time, and a lot of people ask for his time. But the win with Tim was when a current small group leader said, hey, my life has been changed by this group of high school guys, or I went to camp last year and my life was transformed. I grew so much. And Tim, come be a part of this group. And when my buddy, who's a current leader, asked Tim was an immediate yes, which is amazing. So maybe there's people in your ministry who are already doing great things. They have experienced the goodness of life change and God moving. They've seen it firsthand. They might be a better person to cast a vision for your next event or activity, or filling your Sunday school or kids ministry volunteers, than you. Like, people see me coming and they run the other direction. But there's something really powerful when one of our current members will do that. So anyhow, I'm walking away from the meeting on Sunday going, was this really worth their time? And if I'm honest with you, maybe is the correct answer. We had average food. The sub sandwiches were a little soggy. The chips were whatever, kettle fried, and they were average. The drinks were lukewarm instead of cold. Like, the content was good, but could I have emailed it to somebody instead of gathering people together? Did I cast a vision for what was happening? So what I would say is, you're going to do a lot of hard work recruiting volunteers, getting them to say yes. I think there's some good strategies to increase that percentage of people that say yes. to move past the 20% of people that serve instead of, the 80% that are the latent serving opportunity in your congregations. But when you ask someone to meet, it is a big deal. When I was new in youth ministry, I had plenty of time on my hands, no kids, newly married, and thought that everybody had the kind of time and space that I did. Now that I'm a parent of now 4 teenagers, 14 to 19 years old, and am full-time in the church and married, and the whole, like, my life is chaos between water polo games and other sporting events and trying to have outside friends of the church, all the demands of ministry. I'm swamped. So when I say yes to a meeting, it's got to be really, really important. It's got to matter. If I'm walking away with a couple minutes in the back of my head going, that wasn't really worth my time, then I'm highly unlikely to join that ministry or be a part of it in the future, or trust the next invitation that comes down the pipe. So when you request, I'm obviously, that's how I feel. So I'm twisting that into, so when I gather people, I got to make sure it really, really matters. So ask yourself the question in the planning stage, is this meeting really worth their time? If not, what do you need to do to make it worth your time? I mean, you're actually doing the same thing right now. You're listening to the introduction, maybe multitasking a little bit, listening in the background, whatever, and you're thinking to yourself, is this meeting worth my time? So good, you're doing it right now, and your volunteers are doing the same thing, especially when you gather together. All right, if you want to reach me, when you communicate via email, I need to be, it's short and sweet. If I see an email that is more than a couple, maybe 100 words, I'm out. I mean, I want to, but it's just too much information. Let me scan it. Let me find the bold points. If I'm really interested in something, and hopefully we've also done the hard work of linking to more detail, don't put that detail in an email, because for a person that you want in your ministry who is a productive, thoughtful, in-demand person, they only have a limited amount of time for that email. So reduce the number of words in your email and link to a lot more information. Now, I'm more of a spontaneous yes email scanner. My wife is just the opposite. She needs all of the detail in the world, step by step, paragraphs and paragraphs. So you want to reach both. So make sure your email is tight, word economy matters, reduce the number of words, but link to stuff that really matters. So if someone's interested, they're going to click that. If they need more information, they can click that and go on from there. So communicate short and sweet, but link to granular detail. This weekend, we trained our volunteers. And as I was training volunteers for a special event, like many of you are this summer or will this fall, I realized that we had this moment where we talked about some tough things. So as you certainly would know, teenagers are going through all sorts of emotional, developmental challenges, hormonal stuff's kicking in. And right now, in particular, in our country, teenagers are really, really hurting. They've never been more connected and more alone. They've never been more isolated in their life. Words like, mental illness, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, those are now in the language of a teenager, maybe more than ever before. And so with that in mind, I realized in my training of my leaders, I had spent a lot of time on that issue, and it deserves time and attention. But I would counter that by saying the number of those instances at our camp, there's certainly going to be kids that struggle in that area, need to be trained on, need to help our leaders understand how to deal with it. But the number of people that are going to experience that is pretty small. So it's important, but it's a small segment. So I think as you think about training your volunteers, spend the appropriate amount of time on things that are going to affect people the most. Now, certain things, they're going to affect a small amount of people, but they're important. So we spend time in those areas. But I would say as you analyze your training, your emails, your events, what you value, it's going to come through in your training. And this weekend, I felt like I might have emphasized the difficult and dark side of youth ministry and what teens are going through so much that I actually panicked and scared some of my volunteers unnecessarily. Now, again, it's important, it's accurate, it's true, it's real, but I think I think I went too far. So just keep that in mind as you train your volunteers as well. I think I said it earlier, if you can send something in an email or link to more, obviously that's a great way to emphasize things beyond that. What's fun is in the new world, digital meetings are more respected than ever. Obviously, you're listening to this digitally today, and we're connecting digitally. In the old days of youth ministry and undoubtedly church ministry, everything had to be in person. And I think those days are gone. So not everything has to be in person anymore. So for example, tomorrow I'm recording our parent orientation for camp. So I work with 6th graders to 8th graders. So a 6th grade parent is going to be super high maintenance. This is their first kid in youth group. We're leaving the kids ministry behind. This is a big moment for a 6th grade parent. And an 8th grade parent, it's not a big deal at all. They've come 2 or 3 years to camp. I mean, sure, there's some new kids in our ministry and all that too, but chances are by the time they get to 8th grade, the parent has started to allow their kid to have more freedoms, and they're not as invested or dropping the kid off in kids ministry each week. They've grown up a little bit. And so I would challenge you to go, is it possible to do this meeting or this training or whatever, insert the blank, this leader gathering in person, or could we do it digitally? So tomorrow I'm recording a 10-minute parent orientation. Now, in the past, we've gathered everyone who's coming, all their parents or grandparents, whatever, into a big auditorium, and we would take an hour of their time, plus travel, childcare, and all that stuff. It is a great night, and there's nothing wrong with that. There certainly even could be a place for that. But in our new reality, a 10-minute, tightly edited video that requires no travel, it doesn't require a night out, it doesn't require childcare, it values and honors their time, still communicates with the humor and fun and values, and then a great downloadable packet. That's going to accomplish the goal without asking for another night out. In the old days, it felt like it was easier to gather people all together. And at least in the culture I'm serving in right now, a 10-minute video that's now on demand, they can watch it whenever is convenient. A 10-minute video versus a 60-minute program, because you can never program less than an hour, right? Or it's not worth their time. But a 10-minute video is a long video. I'll let you know how it goes. If I'm honest with you, it's an experiment. So maybe I'm teaching you something that's totally going to bomb. So ask me Friday how it went. But I think in the new day, I think it'd be wrong to not take those swings, to not try to evolve, find the next level, especially coming out of COVID, where digital is respected more than ever. Don't miss this opportunity to not meet to train your volunteers. It could be really, actually, I'm hoping it's even more powerful. So I send out a parent email. I send out a volunteer email. Everybody's on the same page. And then I get a reply. So everybody who goes to camp heard about the amazing games, the awesome speakers. And this year we're bringing in some food trucks to come on our church property and serve camp food. So we're doing camp kind of at our church because of COVID. And what do? We didn't, whatever. This is our plan. And as soon as I sent the email, I was like, that was maybe the world's most perfect email. I'm really good at communicating, and immediately got 10 questions, immediately got reply after reply with this and this. And what about food trucks and meals and drop off times? And I realized that every question that came in was a question that a bunch of other people had and was something I had missed. So what I immediately did was, at first I replied to that parent, they don't need spending money. The drop-off time is 2 p.m. every day. Yes, you could sit in the back and watch a session if you'd like. Yes, we're doing baptisms, whatever all the questions were. And I realized that whenever I'm doing a training of training my volunteers, and one of them say, "Hey, any questions?" That means it was something that they felt was important that you didn't cover. So immediately create a frequently asked questions page. Immediately add that to your website, because if that person took the time to reply and ask, other people have that exact same question. So typically what we do is we just reply to that email and move on. But a higher level move would be to take that email and go, who else is missing this information and how can I get it to someone else? My son went to a dodgeball event on Saturday night, and I DM'd the Instagram account going, "Hey, my son's coming alone. Can he be assigned to a team, or does he need to bring friends in order to be on the team?" And I know it's a silly example, it's dodgeball, but what I loved about this church, this ministry that he was dropping in at, was they immediately made a Instagram post that said, "Are you coming alone? No problem. We'll put you on a team right away. Have enough people for your team? You can have your own team." So they took a parent's question, my question, and turned it into a social media answer that helped all of the parents and all of the volunteers. I just thought that was so pro, and that's the kind of leader that I want to be as well. All right, a couple more thoughts as we talk about training church volunteers for special events. The closer you get to an event, the more frequent the meetings or more frequent the communication. The closer you get to an event, the shorter the meetings and shorter the communication should be. So when you're doing a big brainstorm and you're planning this meeting, those meetings might be really, really long. The emails might be incredibly detailed. The closer you get, the shorter each of the meetings and the frequency should be as well. One of the ideas we have this year as we divide up our volunteers was to say, could we do like cabin leaders and the people that are doing the discussion groups and the spiritual work? Is it possible for them to be on one team and we have an operations team that handles the recreational games, that handles the registration, that handles safety and security, all that stuff? So we have some volunteers divided out into two different groups now. I wouldn't say a spiritual group and a non-spiritual group, because that isn't accurate. But there's people that are in the trenches with the teenagers, and then there's people that are in the trenches, but that are handling other roles, clean up, set up, tear down. That's been really, really powerful as well. We added a third team this year where we ask volunteers in our church to do photos and video. So the language of our culture is photos. It's moving really quickly to video. Instagram is dead for pictures, but it's alive and well for video. So rather than me trying to scramble, we have a dedicated team of a couple people who are really good at social media that are handling that as well. And then I'll just throw out maybe one more thought, and that would simply be this. When we talk about training our volunteers, usually that ends at the event. So the event is over and everyone's high-fiving or cleaning up and we're exhausted. I'm hoping to have this same feeling on Thursday when our camp is over next week. But really quickly in the church world, we're on to the next thing. So I've got a end of summer bonfire, school starts, fall kickoff, life group leader training, life group launch. I mean, I'm not slowing down after camp. In fact, if anything, I'm pushing it even further and using camp as momentum for the season ahead. So I would want to remind you in this moment, as you train your volunteers, you can train them before the event, super important, at the event with some nudging and coaching. And did you see that? Or look at this kid over here, go talk to him, whatever. At the event is a great time for nudges. But after the event is over, don't just rush on to the next event or next thing, but allow your volunteers to be part of the debrief. A, so they have a voice, they're more invested, and B, so that they learn and grow. So they start to think, how can we make this better? And they learn from you the values of your church or ministry. They also start to think in terms of hits and misses. And eventually they become autonomous too, where they start to make those changes in real time. So instead of us at the debrief going, man, that was a miss, we're celebrating a volunteer who saw the miss and fixed it before it ended up in the debrief in the end. There's a ton of ways to reach and train and encourage your volunteers, but those are a few of the things that I'm learning right now in my youth ministry that I hope are helpful to you and will spur some discussion as you talk about how God's working in your ministry and how you're leading and training volunteers too.
Josh, I absolutely thought was brilliant, that concept of being able to reply to somebody's question by actually going right to social media and answering for everybody. It
Isn't
makes
that
you
brilliant?
seem so far ahead of the game. Yeah.
I know.
And,
As soon as that happened, I went, that's brilliant. I'm going to teach that
Yeah.
and pretend that it was my idea.
Well, welcome to the Idea Network, where we definitely steal ideas and present them as our own.
Yeah.
We own that. That should be our brand. We are glad to have another idea we could steal. We're going to go to a live Q&A right now, Josh, because I know there are a lot of questions coming in through the feed here. But at the same time, maybe there's some questions right here. We're going to have Thomas go ahead and kick us off with our first question. Then if you have another question, go ahead and just wave like this, so you can press that button that has the little hand and wave it up, and then I'll call on you next. Go ahead, Thomas. What's the first question we have for Josh while he's here?
So one of the questions I want to ask, I'm a lead pastor of a church. So what is the most important thing you want your lead pastor to know about student ministry?
Oh, great question. Wow. Easy answer. That we exist. I would say if you can leverage the pulpit, the platform, or I'll just be real honest with you. This week, we sent out an email to our whole congregation. So it's a big old email, and it's from our senior pastor every week. And I love my senior pastor, so full disclaimer, but it said, next week is going to be the best week for your kids, in the subject line. And I was so pumped because I'm like, my senior pastor's thinking about me. My church next week is our junior high camp, and he's telling the whole church. And then I opened the email, and it was about a neighborhood VBS downloadable thing that you can do in your neighborhood to have the best week ever. And I went from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows. So that actually, but all that to say, if my senior pastor the week before camp swung by with a coffee or I know, I remembered, I'm thoughtful. I understand as a senior leader, Thomas, you're thankful that youth ministry is taken care of. You've hired or have great volunteers that are super capable, that you can literally hopefully forget about your youth ministry because it's awesome. But when you remember something, anything, and lean into that a little bit, it goes a long ways. So maybe that's helpful, maybe it's not, but that would definitely be my answer for sure.
Fantastic. Thank you, Thomas, for that question. Great answer, Josh. We just need to be aware that youth ministry is happening and be able to reference it in the positive light. Who else has a question? Just raise your hand and I'll go ahead and call on you at this time, and we'll be ready to go. People are drinking their bottles, but they're not raising their hand.
I'll throw out one question,
right.
One answer to a question that hasn't been asked.
Josh.
Maybe ties into Thomas's question too. When someone proactively reaches out to the youth ministry, so for example, we're going to have a highlight video from this week. And if Thomas from the top said, hey, I want to play a clip of that in my message and affirm our junior high ministry, or let's make sure we work that into the program for the whole church somewhere, that would be such a gift. Instead of me having to upwardly lead and say, hey, pastor, look at how cool this week was. For him or her to like reach down, oh my goodness, that'd be huge. So another example.
I'm going to throw it over to Matt Elin. Matt Elin has worked with teenagers in our ministry here at Southern Hills, but also now works at a different church across town, and he's done a great job. He's a friend of mine, and we're glad that you're on here today. Matt, when it comes to your experience with youth ministry, what has it been like attempting to gather volunteers? And based on what Josh just talked about, have you found it more? Have you found it also true that focusing that one-on-one sniper mode versus a blast out email or a blast out shotgun mode has been helpful. Can you speak to that, Matt?
Yeah, as far as getting new volunteers for youth ministry, yeah.
Yeah.
When I first came to the ministry I'm at here in Las Vegas, man, my goal, I was listening to all the podcasts, and they were all saying to have more than enough, have multiple leaders for your small groups, and found that to be very helpful. The problem is I wanted to get so many that we announced it to the church. We're looking for new leaders. I had just gotten to the church, so I didn't know how to handpick people, and that created a lot of really tough conversations with people that I didn't know, who I just met, because I had to talk to at least 5 or 6 that I'm like, yeah, you should not be in youth ministry. I didn't say that to them, but had to figure out another way to say that. And so I found through that one experience that no, I'm handpicking, and also just people, other people, finding others who are in youth ministry that are excited about it is what I found to be helpful as well.
Well, if any other question, I want to give an opportunity for any other question before we jump into our subgroups. Okay, Kylie has a question, and then we'll jump into our subgroups. Oh no, we have other questions coming in. Okay, go ahead, Kylie first, and then we'll go to Dave.
I do have a question. So my perspective on ministry volunteers is a little different, not so much church oriented, but event oriented within the Idea Network. But a lot of times if we're doing an external event, I'm working with ministry or volunteers from other churches. So I have to get them to recruit for their own church, but for me. So my question is, how do you motivate people to want to volunteer?
Yeah, great question. I think in the old days, maybe the need was enough. Like, we need people to do this overnighter, and people signed up. We had a bus driver and a couple people, and it all worked out.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's completely pivoted. There are so many needs and so many asks that the need is no longer enough. I would say it's about story. So you need to tell the story. This morning in our staff meeting here at church, we do a thing called story time, where we literally tell stories of what God's doing in our church. And youth ministry was well represented in that today. Now that's an internal thing, obviously, but I think the more that you can cast a vision and tell stories. We have a lady in our ministry. She's 83, actually 84 now. So not a typical youth ministry volunteer. And we have told her story just because she doesn't look the, young, cool, popular, like college age, trendy, none of that. She's 84 and she was a teacher, but she said something a year ago. She said, I got more than I gave about serving in our youth ministry. And that has echoed through our church as the story. Hey, you're going to come and you're going to make a difference in the life of a teenager. Absolutely. But you're going to grow and you're going to be challenged. And so I think it's stories of individual kids. I think it's stories of what God's doing. I do think it's video and media for sure. But I really think a big part of it is casting a vision for their growth and how God will use them to do kingdom work as well. So to me, it comes down to telling the story over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I love it. Telling the life story and stories of life change. Awesome. Dave, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, with different events and different ministries within the youth, we're going to be training them in different manners, and certain people have different skill sets, but something that's around the board, and I want every one of my leaders to be doing, is staying connected. Because, John 15, if we're not connected, there's going to be no fruit. They could be there doing their thing, but as far as being an example or an encouragement to the other leaders to make sure that on their own time, that they're staying connected. You want to be an example to them, but is there a practical kind of routine or something you do to help remind the leaders, hey, what you're doing is awesome with the kids. You did an awesome job doing a backflip or doing whatever, but kind of reminding them, hey, have you been staying connected in the word and in prayer? Is there a way you do that in a kind of more in an accountability that's well received amongst the leaders?
Yeah, dynamite question, Dave. I like that you're the Dave Dahmer. That's awesome. I don't know if you went to the Ohio State or what your story is, but that's great. I would say in broad strokes, there is an assumption that leaders have a deep spiritual well, that they're walking with Jesus, that things are good in their life and home and personal private life as well. And I think that is one of the great mistakes of our ministries, is assuming that everyone and everything's okay, and that they're spiritually full and they're not dry. In full disclosure, I'm not sure I have a great answer for you. I would say I agree with you on the problem, and I would like to tackle that in the future. And I'm not sure we're doing like a great job. Certainly there's conversations, there's relationships. After our life group night, we'll all go to In-N-Out afterwards and grab a burger, and we're talking and laughing. And I think in relationship and interpersonally, a lot of those conversations are happening. But I don't think I have a good answer for like, this is the way to do it outside of that. But I know that that is an assumption we make that is super, super dangerous. And obviously when people are going down a really tough, an example would be if some of your volunteers discover that they're separated or going through a divorce or whatever, and you're shocked by that. Well, my goodness, what happened along the way that you weren't a part of? Or a person's like, man, I'm just so spiritually dry and I'm burned out, and you're surprised by that. There is a problem, because we're making an assumption that everything's okay. So great question. I'm with you. I would say interpersonally is how we address it, but I'm not sure I have a killer answer beyond that. Yeah.
Let's talk about the debrief after the event. The question came in from Dale. What kind of specific questions do you ask your volunteers after the event that you can get all the relevant material back so that you can make the event better year after year?
Yeah. What are the questions that we ask?
What are the questions you ask? What is your process for a debrief to encourage growth in that specific event year after year?
Absolutely. I would say we always start with story. So start with a story of life change. And that to me sets the win of the room is celebratory, and God moved, and we had 4 baptisms and 3 kids trusted Jesus. Or like, I love that stuff. And once we've celebrated the awesome, then we're way more likely to attack the problems. And so for me, if we just come into a debrief meeting, we're like, okay, man, where did we fail? Like, I can't do it. I can't do it. So I need to start with celebration, with story, with how God moved. And this was a win. Now let's figure out where were the losses. And so we actually just use a real simple, just the SWOT analysis, which isn't too crazy. You could also just do high lows, really simple. What worked? What's a keeper? What do we punt next year? And then we also have a blacklist, which is things we'll never do again. And I'm trying to think of an example of something that's on the blacklist. It'd be something like we did an eggnog toss one Christmas party, and eggnog cracked open and is everywhere in the church carpet, and our youth room smells a little bit like sour eggnog to this day. So that we have, this is great. We're doing this every year. It became an annual tradition. This is terrible. We're never going to do that again. And then there's we got in a lot of trouble. Let's make sure future generations don't do an eggnog toss either.
If you want a full, complete blacklist, all everybody has to do is email Daniel Hester. Daniel will have a full email or full blacklist of all sorts of things you should never do again, I'm sure. The perfect person for that. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Let's talk budget for youth ministry, because oftentimes a budget for youth ministry can, basically whatever we have left over and whatever money you can bring in from camp. Is there some sort of a formula that a youth ministry should take, as in we have this many teenagers, how much money per teenager? What's your formula? What do you got there?
Yeah, that's great. I would say the book Sustainable Youth Ministry is kind of been established. They talk very specifically about, whatever, $150 per kid equals budget. I mean, I'm super biased towards youth ministry. So I would say more. You need to budget more for your youth ministry, whatever it is, it needs to be more. I've never met a budget that I couldn't overspend anyhow. Don't ask me how camp budget's going. It's not pretty. I mean, camp's going to be amazing, but people better give. Anyhow, sorry. I would say, if we want to invest in the next generation, if we care about those students, tell the story of your youth ministry, cast that vision, and budget well. Sustainable Youth Ministry, Mark DeVries is the author. I think he would say somewhere, over $100 a kid. I would say a smaller church needs to budget more. I've served in a very small church in Michigan my first 8 years, and then all the way up to Saddleback level, which is mega. Mariners is a huge church. So I think it decreases per student the number of kids that you have. I would like to think of it as a couple $100 a kid. That might be a total pipe dream. But I just think by the time you subsidize camp some and you equip the youth room, budgeting is really, really difficult. And many youth ministries, don't have that analytical person at the top to really handle a budget well. It's something I've had to learn because I'm not that person either. But I would say probably more, and find a number that you're comfortable with, and then let that number grow. So sometimes, whatever, the youth ministry budget is set at $10,000 or something. I don't no idea, but let's just pick a number. And let's say the youth ministry grows and we don't ever revisit that number. So have a system in place that allows that to be revisited on a yearly basis. Some churches, mine included, will do if you spend it all, then you can get that amount next year. And if you didn't spend it all, you get less. I think that's not a great move on so many levels. If you overspent, and with COVID, we're down like 30% right now. We did a 10 and a 15. That's actually 25%. That's why you don't trust me with the budget. But we're taking it, we call it a haircut, and we're just taking everybody's trimming a little bit. So I just think reevaluate your youth ministry dollars, ask for a plan. Like, one of the ways that I've been able to be funded very, very well is I understand that I'm also storytelling and I'm also casting a vision. So if you're here, whatever, Thomas is a senior leader, right? Go to your youth pastor, your youth director, or whatever, and say to him or her, show me a plan. And maybe Thomas or whoever, sorry, I don't want to pick on you, but maybe you'd even say, hey, swing big on one thing this year. Like, throw something at me that's ridiculous, and let's try something, and give permission to dream. Sometimes the budget is the biggest dream killer of a church, of a youth ministry in particular. There's a few thoughts. I would say go to Sustainable Youth Ministry for real numbers and real justification of why. And I think there's some helpful stuff in there too.
I love it. So what you're saying is, if mommy and daddy give you a certain amount of money to build a lemonade stand, and sorry, that's
well, I would
I'm
say
5 years old.
Fundraising is fine. I've done I've 8 years of my life doing fundraising, but I'm wasting time to a degree trying to raise money for the youth ministry that I could be discipling teenagers. Now, I think I could make a counterpoint that says car washes, the conversations are pretty amazing, and the discipleship is actually pretty great. But one of the creative ways that we've tried to increase our budget is we charge for small groups. I'm not saying that's an everybody thing, but in order for life groups to not be another cost on the church, we charge $25 for the year. So not a crazy amount, but it buys them a Bible, a t-shirt, and some snacks throughout the year. So it's a low barrier of entry, and it gives us a little new, fresh budget to work with that I think is helpful as well.
I love it, man. We really appreciate this. We could do questions all day long. We really only have time for one more, and it's really quick. And that is in relation to curriculum for training your volunteers. This is something you could throw out there. You say, you know what, this has been a good curriculum, or no, you better write your own because you know your youth ministry best.
Really, really good question. I think whatever you use, whether you write your own stuff or buy something and use it, it has to be contextualized to you anyhow. So there's a diminishing returns at some point where you become a curriculum writer instead of a youth pastor. And I would say, man, there's so many great resources out there. Resourcing in youth ministry has never been stronger. I, with my buddy Doug Fields, we started Download Youth Ministry that literally has stuff you can download, look over, edit, and push print on. Games, videos, whatever you need for a program. You don't need to spend time doing all that now. For $3, you can just So, I mean, I really like highly customized curriculum that I wrote. I do, but it's so much work. It's not always worth it. So maybe a hybrid would be where we're at in this current moment of buying a few things, getting some resources, beg, borrow, steal, download, whatever, and stuff that I write. And here's why. I think the church expects me to do the spiritual work. So I'm not sure that that's fair or whatever, but it is. That's the reality. They're fine if I download a game or a video, but the spiritual work, they're like, hey, this is why we hired you. So regardless of if you use a curriculum or not, do the hard work of making it for your kids and praying through what God would have you teach on. And
awesome. Thanks, Josh
for the
Griffin.
kind words too. The chat's been very nice from Josh saying DYM is the best youth ministry resource I've ever used. That's awesome. Dale, oh, this is good. I should have mentioning trainmyvolunteers.com. We're doing a big national training for volunteers that I think will be really helpful. We had about 30,000 people at it in the past. It's an all video training all over the US. Yeah, that might be helpful too. You guys are better than me at just look at the chat.
Yeah, you don't need to self-promote when you're in this group. We'll promote for you, I guess.
I like it. I
Josh
appreciate
Burks,
it.
by the way, talking about the best youth resource he's ever used. That's great. It's wonderful. Everybody knows, though, in this group, we can't trust Joshua Burks. So that it doesn't mean anything. By the way,
invalidates the endorsement.
It invalidates. It really is not so good for you. Anybody remember, speaking of youth resources, when I was young, anybody remember the SOAP books, SOAP, the SOAP books? How many of you remember that? Raise your hand. I'm just wondering. Okay, a couple of you old timers, the SOAP books, and they had youth activity. You would flip the pages, literal pages in literal books, and you flip and you'd pull out and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this skit. Anyway, thank you so much, Josh, for joining us. This has been a great conversation. We've had a great time with you. Glad to have you part of the network. We're really looking forward to the next 2 weeks. The next 2 weeks in the virtual roundtable. And again, if you have a membership, you are more than welcome to invite anybody in your church or ministry that works alongside of you. They don't have to be a full-time staff. They can be a volunteer that is a high-level volunteer, high-functioning volunteer, and you can bring them into that conversation. The next 2 weeks, very, very exciting. I'm excited about the concept and the topics specifically. We're really talking about creating community. The larger the church gets, the less this becomes natural and organic. And so you have to become extremely intentional. And when you say large ministry, look, I'm talking about 80 people or more. When you get to a place where it's not just you and a few dozen friends getting together to worship Jesus, community has to be intentional. And so we're going to kick that off next week on August 3rd. I'm going to be doing the actual teaching aspect of it with a session entitled Creating a Welcoming Congregational Culture. Meaning, what does it feel like for people when they visit your church for the very first time? I'm not talking about a tent out front. I'm not necessarily talking about a good announcement at the beginning. I'm talking about, do people feel welcome? And how do you make people feel welcome with different personality types? You know, the way you make a Fred Murray feel welcome is different than the way you make a Josh Tice feel welcome. We're going to talk about that next week. And then 2 weeks from now, under the same concept of creating community, we have a special guest who's going to be joining us. His name is Alan Parr. Alan Parr is a YouTube phenomenon. And he really is. And if you haven't followed his YouTube, go ahead and look up Alan Parr. He's going to be with us live, and he's going to be discussing specifically how to help the congregation study the Bible deeper. Specifically, he's going to be looking at creating a culture of community through the teaching of the Word of God by not assuming that people don't want to study in depth the Word of God. And if you're a follower of Alan Parr on YouTube, you'll understand where he's going with that. If you're not, go on YouTube and give him a follow, see what we're going to be dealing with. He's going to be joining us on the podcast in a couple months, and he's going to be joining us live 2 weeks from now. Well, I don't have time to get into all the other weeks to come. August is filled up. I'm telling y'all, you're going to have a great time with it. So thank you for joining us. Any last messages from you, Kylie, before we exit out? All right. Don't forget Idea Night. If you are interested, go ahead and sign up immediately and share that 100th episode of the podcast. Later, guys. Good to talk to you today.